overriding the toString method. I might have mentioned this in class, how things get kind of like automatically converted into strings when you do system.out.println, that sort of thing. I didn't know this was covered in the material. For some reason I thought it wasn't, but when I looked at your lab, it looks like I have a toString method overriding in there, so I'm going to show you what that means. So first of all, every object in Java is an object. There's an actual class called object. I've mentioned this before. And what that means is that everything that's a class in Java, including this point that we have here, I'll show you what I mean here in a second, has something called a toString method. The toString method is a method that automatically gets invoked. It gets called sort of automatically when you use it in the right context. So say you want to print it out or something. When the context calls for a string, it will be invoked automatically. And again, every object has this. What this means is that using a concept called overriding, you can change what it does depending on the object. So by default, here's what it does. I'm going to print out this object. This is, again, think of this as a generic like starter place. It's like a formless mass object. But what it does by default is it prints out the, I think, package name or something like that, the name of the object, name of the class, plus this hash code that every object has automatically. Another thing all objects have. That's the default thing that it does, but you can change that. So, until now, what we've been doing with our points is we've been calling, if you look at the definition of the point, the class definition, what do we have? We have a method called printPoint. You can do this. This is just perfectly fine if you want. But you could also alternatively do something a little bit more elegant, and that would be to override the toString method that, again, every object in Java has it, including the ones you make. I made this point. A point is an object, and that'll make more sense in Java too. But since it's an object, it has a toString method. I can change what that does. So here's the syntax for how you do this. You will do this with your fractions in Lab 7. So use the override directive. I don't think that's strictly necessary. That's sort of like a nice, proper way to do it. It's more like a Java doc kind of thing or whatever. It's more meta. So, but do put that's good style. And then what you do is this will always look the same. This part, let me get rid of this. Whenever you override the toString method of a class, it will always be public string toString, exactly. No arguments. And then curly braces. And then you would need to, you see how you got an error here? Why? Because you're returning a string, and I'm not returning a string. So you have to return a string. In this case, what we're going to return is this, basically. You see how I changed this to this.getX, because that's basically, what you're doing. You can use the get method to do that. But I just pretty much copied and pasted this down here. I could have copied and pasted it and not changed it to get this.getX, and it still would have worked. But anyway, what this will do is it will return this thing that we've been doing before, the print point, whenever we print out a point. What does that mean? Let's look. So I created a bunch of these points before. I'll really only need one of them. I'll do the first one. So you create a point with let's actually give it some arguments. Let's do 4, 5 like we were doing before. Instead of saying p1.printPoint, I could say system.out.println p1. I could take this string variable right here and just print it out. Now, what does that mean? What does it mean to print out an object, a variable that holds the address of an object? Nothing really, unless you redefine toString. If you override toString and say, in this particular case, I want it to actually print some kind of, well, let's actually run it and see what it does. So let me get rid of this. What does it do? It prints out 4, 5, like we were doing before. By the way, get rid of this junk in the constructor, because it kind of just gets in the way and obscures the fact, because this also calls this print point. I'm going to get rid of all this junk. Alright, get rid of the whole number of points thing. We're not actually talking about that right now, so we don't need to do it anymore. So let's run this again with a new definition. You see, when you print out P1, what does it do? It prints out 4, 5 in parentheses. Why? Because that's the string that I return. Now later on you'll learn about deep copy or deep, what's it called? You don't want to necessarily return just the bare string. It depends on what you're doing. But for now, just think of it this way. So when you do your fraction, instead of printing out parentheses, number, comma, number, you're just going to print what? I'll show you what it looks like. You'll return a string that makes it look like that for 4/5. And that's toString in a nutshell. There's more to it than that. It's not only used here, it's whenever. It's not just print line or system.out or print line. It can be used anytime you want. Like for instance, yeah, anywhere a string's called for.